My name is Claire Weston. I am 34 years old, and at 11:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in August, while I was lying on a hospital bed with an IV in my left arm and a monitor strapped to my stomach, and our daughter's heartbeat filling the room like a metronome, my husband looked at his phone, looked at me and said, "I have to make a call. This is going to take a while anyway." He walked out of the delivery room at 11:47 in the morning. He did not come back for 6 hours and 19 minutes. What he did not know was that 40 minutes after he left, my grandmother's estate attorney called my cell phone from a blocked number. What he did not know was that I had been named the sole beneficiary of a trust my grandmother had been quietly building for 31 years. What he did not know was that the number on that trust was $45,200,000. And what he did not know was that by the time he walked back through that hospital door smelling like airport bourbon and fresh excuses, I had already called my own attorney, already reviewed the preliminary documents, and already made one very calm, very deliberate decision about the rest of my life. My name is Claire Weston. I am 34 years old. And this is that story. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story does not start in a delivery room. It starts in a house in Franklin, Tennessee, where I grew up watching my grandmother, Dorothy Mae Calloway, do everything right and receive very little credit for it. My grandmother was 78 years old when she passed. She had been a school teacher for 32 years, a widow for 20, and one of the most quietly disciplined women I have ever known. She drove a 12-year-old Buick that she maintained herself by reading the manual. She clipped coupons until she was 75. She turned off lights when she left a room, kept the thermostat at 68 in winter and 72 in summer, and made her own bread on Sunday mornings because, she said, store-bought bread had too much air in it and not enough patience. She wore the same winter coat for 11 years, and she bought it on clearance. Nobody in my family thought she had money. Nobody talked about it. My mother, Sandra Calloway Weston, assumed her mother lived on her teacher's pension and whatever Social Security sent every month. My uncle, Dennis Calloway, lived in Phoenix and called on Christmas and birthdays, which was more than he did for anyone else, so it passed as effort. I was the one who drove to Franklin every third weekend. I was the one who brought groceries when her knee was bad. I was the one who sat at her kitchen table every Friday when I could manage it, and listened to her talk about her students, her garden, the news, the price of gas. We played gin rummy. She always won. She never talked about money. But once, when I was 26 and had just gotten laid off from a marketing job in Nashville and was trying not to fall apart about it, she set her cards down on the table and looked at me the way she always did when she was going to say something important. Her eyes were very still and very clear. She said, "Claire, I want you to know that I have made arrangements for you. I cannot tell you what they are yet, because you'll worry about me instead of yourself. But I want you to know that when the time comes, you will be taken care of. Now pick up your cards and stop sulking." I thought she meant she'd left me a piece of furniture. A brooch. Maybe the Buick. I picked up my cards. Dorothy Mae Calloway died on a Sunday morning in late June at the age of 78. She died in her own bed in her own house, with a copy of a Louise L'Amour novel on the nightstand and a glass of sweet tea on the coaster she had used for 20 years. The hospice nurse called me at 6:48 in the morning. I was already in the car by 7:15. My mother was devastated in the way that people who do not visit often enough are devastated, with a lot of very visible grief and a great deal of talk about what should be done next. My uncle flew in from Phoenix and spent most of the first 3 days asking about the house. My husband, Marcus, came down from Nashville for the service and left the same evening because he had a tea time on Thursday in Scottsdale and the flights were complicated. That was Marcus. I should tell you about Marcus fully because he deserves to be understood precisely, not vaguely. Marcus Weston was 38 years old, 6'1", handsome in the reliable way that men who exercise consistently and buy good haircuts are handsome. He was a regional sales director for a commercial real estate software company. He made $114,000 a year before bonuses, and he spoke about it constantly, always with the right amount of humility to make it sound like he was just answering the question. He wore watches that cost more than my car payment. He had strong opinions about restaurants. We had met at a friend's wedding when I was 29. He was charming in a way I had not been prepared for. He remembered small things I said and brought them up later. He sent flowers on unremarkable Tuesdays. He told me I was the most interesting woman he had met in years, and I believed him because in that particular season of my life, I was ready to be believed. We married when I was 31. The first year was genuinely good. The second year, I started noticing the pattern. Marcus kept a mental ledger of every sacrifice he believed he made for our marriage, and he referenced it regularly. If I asked him to come home early for dinner when I had worked late 3 nights in a row, he would say, "I left Scottsdale a day early for your grandmother's thing." I think I'm pretty flexible. If I asked him to skip a work trip so we could attend couples counseling, which he had agreed to and then forgotten, he would say, "You know I had this blocked out for months." Some of us have professional obligations. He did not like my grandmother. He never said it directly, but he found reasons not to be in Franklin when I went. He found her kitchen too small and her conversation too slow. He once said, at dinner with our friends Cara and Paul, that he admired people who had ambition, implying through tone and timing that Dorothy May Calloway, retired schoolteacher, clipped coupons, 12-year-old Buick, had had none. I did not fight him on it. I should have. But I was 32 and pregnant and tired in a way that went deeper than sleep, and I kept telling myself it was a phase. The pregnancy had not been planned. We had been talking about children in the abstract way that couples who are not quite sure about each other talk about children, sometime in the future, when things settle down, when the timing is right. The timing was never going to be right for Marcus, because Marcus was always planning the next trip. Taos in February, Costa Rica in April, Scotland in September. When I showed him the positive test on a Tuesday night in November, he sat down at the kitchen island and looked at the counter for a long time. Then he said, "Well, there goes Scotland. There goes Scotland. Not 'we're going to be parents,' not 'I love you,' not 'are you okay?' There goes Scotland." I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood in the bathroom doorway, holding the test, and I looked at my husband's profile, and I noted something very carefully. Not with rage. With clarity. He tried to recover. He stood up and hugged me and said the right things, and by the next morning, he had shifted into what I can only describe as project mode. Planning, organizing, scheduling, researching strollers with the same energy he brought to booking flights. He wanted a boy. He said so directly. When the anatomy scan came back and the technician said, "Girl," Marcus nodded and said, "Okay, that works." Like she was a flight connection. The due date was August 13th. Marcus had booked a trip to the Amalfi Coast with 3 of his work friends for August 9th through the 16th. He booked it in February when I was 4 months pregnant and the due date was already established and visible to anyone who looked at a calendar. When I pointed this out, he said the trip was reschedulable. He said it with such certainty that I almost believed him. By July, it was clear he had not rescheduled it. I found the confirmation email when he left his laptop open on the kitchen counter. His flight was still booked for August 9th. Non-refundable premium cabin. Hotel on the cliffside. $6,400 total, charged to the credit card I did not have access to. I did not confront him. I took a photograph of the screen with my phone. Then I made myself a glass of water and I sat down at the kitchen table. And I thought for a very long time about what kind of woman I wanted to be when my daughter arrived. I called my grandmother's estate attorney the following morning, a man named Robert Hargrove based in Franklin. I had found his name and number in a folder Grandma Dorothy had left labeled simply for Claire, tucked inside the front cover of the Louis L'Amour novel on her nightstand. I had carried it home from Franklin 6 weeks earlier and not opened it because I thought it was a letter. I finally opened it at the kitchen table while Marcus was at the gym. Inside the folder was Robert Hargrove's card A handwritten note from my grandmother with 3 sentences, and the cover page of something titled, "The Dorothy May Calloway Revocable Living Trust." My grandmother's handwriting said, "Call Robert when you're ready. Not before. You'll know when. Love, G." I was ready. I called Robert Hargrove at 9:14 on a Thursday morning in late July. He answered on the second ring. His voice was the kind that belongs in old courtrooms, unhurried, precise, with no extra syllables. He said, "Miss Calloway, I've been expecting your call." He explained the basics over the phone and told me we needed to meet in person to go through the full documentation. I drove to Franklin the following Saturday while Marcus was golfing. I sat in Robert Hargrove's office for 2 hours and 40 minutes. I went through every page. I asked questions. He answered all of them. My grandmother had started building the trust when I was 3 years old. She had invested steadily for 31 years. Quietly, methodically, the way she did everything. She had worked with a financial advisor for the last 20 years, a woman named Grace Park, who had managed the portfolio with low fees and long patience. The trust held a diversified portfolio of index funds, 2 commercial real estate properties in Nashville that had appreciated substantially, a small parcel of land in Williamson County, and a life insurance policy. The total valuation as of the most recent quarterly statement was $45,200,000. I sat in Robert Hargrove's office in Franklin, Tennessee on a Saturday in July, 7 months pregnant, and I did not cry. I looked at the number. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at Robert Hargrove and I said, "What do I need to do next?" He told me. I listened. I took notes on a yellow legal pad with a pen I borrowed from his desk. At the end of the meeting, he said, "Your grandmother was very specific about confidentiality. She did not share the details of this trust with any other family members. She wanted you to have the information on your own terms." On your own terms. I drove home with the window down and the August heat coming through, and I thought about Dorothy May Calloway playing gin rummy in her small kitchen and keeping her own counsel for 31 years. She had been the most patient woman I had ever known. I was going to need to learn from that. I spent the next 10 days doing 4 things in complete silence. First, I called an attorney in Nashville, a woman named Angela Marsh who specialized in family law and asset protection. I had found her through a referral from my college roommate, and I went to see her alone on a Tuesday afternoon, telling Marcus I had a prenatal appointment that ran long. Angela Marsh was 51 years old, small, sharp-eyed, and precise in the way of someone who has heard every version of every story and still listens carefully. I told her everything. I brought the trust documents, the credit card statement I had photographed, and the booking confirmation for Marcus's Amalfi trip. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set her pen down and said, "What are you hoping for?" I said, "I want to make sure that whatever I do next, I do it correctly. I want my daughter to be safe. I want the assets protected, and I do not want to make any decisions out of anger." She said, "Good. That's exactly the right order." We met twice more before my due date. Second, I set up a personal checking account in my name only at a bank across town from the one Marcus and I used jointly. I transferred my emergency fund, which I had been building quietly from my freelance accounting income for 3 years, into that account. It was $41,600, not because I thought I would need it immediately, because I wanted to understand what it felt like to have something that was entirely mine. Third, I prepared a folder, documents, notes, dates, account numbers, everything organized in the way my grandmother would have organized it, tabs, labels, chronological order. I kept it in the trunk of my car in a waterproof bag. Fourth, I kept showing up. I went to the prenatal appointments. I made dinner. I asked Marcus about his work trips with the same level of interest I had always shown. I watched him. I noted things. He mentioned Amalfi twice in the first week of August, each time framing it slightly differently, once as a work thing he was unsure about, once as something his friends had planned that he felt obligated to attend. He was building his case without realizing I already knew the verdict. The contractions started at 4:42 in the morning on Tuesday, August 11th, 2 days before the due date. I timed them for an hour and a half before I woke Marcus. He sat up and looked at his phone first. Then he looked at me. He said, "Now, you're sure?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay. Give me 10 minutes to shower." He showered for 18 minutes. I timed it from the edge of the bed, sitting with my overnight bag at my feet, breathing through the contractions the way the instructor had taught us in the class Marcus attended twice out of 4 sessions. We arrived at St. Thomas Midtown at 7:23 in the morning. The nurses were efficient and kind. They got me into a room and monitored and comfortable. Marcus sat in the chair by the window with his phone. I watched him answer 3 texts before 9 o'clock. Labor was slow. That is the nature of first labors. The nurses explained this. I knew this from reading every book on the subject over 8 months while Marcus skimmed 1 chapter about the partner's role and declared himself prepared. At 11:32, he stood up, stretched, and looked at his phone with an expression I had come to recognize very well. It was the expression of a man who is somewhere else in his head and barely managing to stand in the place his body had been assigned. "I have to make a call," he said. "This is going to take a while anyway." He walked out at 11:47. I know the time because I looked at the clock on the monitor the moment the door closed. I held that number in my mind the way you hold something fragile. My nurse, a woman named Patricia, who had been in labor and delivery for 16 years and had the calm of someone who has seen every version of every human moment, checked on me at noon. She did not ask where Marcus was. She just pulled up a chair and sat with me. She had warm hands and she did not talk unless I needed her to. At 12:29, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a Nashville area code I did not recognize. I answered. The voice on the other end said, "Miss Calloway? This is Robert Hargrove. I apologize for the timing, but I've been trying to reach you for 2 days. The trust has passed through the final probate clearance. I have documents ready for your signature whenever you're available, and I wanted you to hear directly from me. Everything is confirmed. The assets transfer to you as of this week." I said, "Thank you, Robert. I'll call you tomorrow." My voice was completely steady. I set the phone down on the bed beside me. Patricia looked at me. I looked at her. I said, "My grandmother left me some money." She said, "Good timing?" I said, "You have no idea." At 2:17, I called Angela Marsh from the hospital bed with Patricia in the room. Angela picked up on the first ring. I said, "The trust is confirmed. I want to move forward with what we discussed." She said, "I have everything ready. Take care of your daughter first." "We'll talk on Thursday," I said. "Thank you." I hung up. At 4:51 in the afternoon, our daughter was born. She weighed 7 pounds and 3 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and her great-grandmother's forehead. The nurses placed her on my chest, and she made a sound that was very small and very certain, and I held her with both arms and I said, "Hi, Eleanor. I've been waiting for you. If you have ever been in a moment where everything you needed was already in the room and the one person who should have been there was somewhere else, you know the particular quality of that silence. It is not empty, it is very full." Eleanor Dorothy Weston. Eleanor, for the elegance of it. Dorothy for the woman who had spent 31 years making sure her granddaughter would never have to ask permission for her own life. Patricia told me later that Marcus arrived at 6 o'clock and 6 minutes. He came through the door with his jacket over his arm and his tie loosened. He smelled like bourbon and the particular kind of cologne that concentrates when a man has been sweating in a suit. He stopped in the doorway when he saw me holding Eleanor. His expression went through several things in quick succession, and I watched each one carefully. "She's here," he said. "She's been here for over an hour," I said. My voice was the same voice I used to tell him the mail had arrived. He crossed the room and looked at Eleanor in the way that men who are not prepared sometimes look at newborns, with a kind of blinking wonder that is real, but also insufficient. He said, She's beautiful. And he meant it. I could see that he meant it. But what he had done could not be undone by meaning something in the moment he was present for. He stayed that night. He held Eleanor and sent photographs to his parents and his work friends. He ordered dinner from his phone. He slept in the recliner by the window. He did not apologize for leaving. He did not explain where he had been. In the morning, he brought me coffee from the hospital cafeteria and set it on the bedside table and said, "How are you feeling?" I said, "I'm fine." I was not fine, and I was also completely fine. Both things were entirely true. We came home from the hospital on Thursday. On Friday morning, while Marcus was in the shower, I called Angela Marsh from the back porch with Eleanor sleeping in the bassinet beside me. Angela and I talked for 42 minutes. When I went back inside, Marcus was eating toast and reading something on his laptop. He looked up and said, "Who was that?" I said, "My accountant." He nodded and went back to his screen. I want to pause for a moment and speak directly to you, because I think some of you watching right now have felt exactly this kind of stillness. Not the stillness of having nothing to say, but the stillness of knowing exactly what you know and choosing very carefully when to say it. If this story is finding you at the right moment, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends, because what happens in that living room 2 weeks from now, I am still not entirely sure I believe I did it. Now, back to the story. The Amalfi trip departure date was August 9th, which had already passed. Marcus did not go. He had not rescheduled it. He had let it lapse without telling me and without acknowledging that I knew, and he wore the sacrifice of that missed trip like a coat he wanted me to notice. On the Tuesday of Eleanor's first full week home, he mentioned it at dinner. "The guys went to Amalfi without me," he said. "It is what it is," I said. "That was good of you to stay." My voice was warm and even. He looked at me for a second as though he was checking for something. He did not find it. He went back to his food. Angela Marsh had filed the initial petition the previous Thursday. It was for legal separation, and it included a full accounting of the marital assets and a motion to establish Eleanor's primary residence. The document was precise and detailed and had been built over 6 weeks of careful preparation. Marcus would be served within 10 business days. Robert Hargrove had already transferred the trust documentation to a separate asset management firm. The assets were fully in my name, entirely outside the marital estate, established by the trust structure Grandma Dorothy had built over 31 years. In Tennessee, assets inherited through a properly structured trust do not become marital property. Angela had confirmed this 4 separate times from 4 separate angles. The $45,200,000 belonged to me and to Eleanor. Marcus had no claim to any part of it. What I did in those 2 weeks, while Marcus believed we were adjusting to new parenthood, was this. I met with Grace Park, the financial advisor who had managed the trust portfolio for 20 years. She was 63 years old, silver-haired, and spoke about compound interest the way other people speak about faith. She helped me understand what I had in concrete terms, not just the number but the structure behind it. The 2 commercial properties in Nashville were generating a combined rental income of $146,000 per year. The land in Williamson County had an appraised value of $6.2 million and was attracting interest from a development firm. The portfolio was diversified and conservatively managed and had grown at an average of 7.3% per year for the last decade. I asked Grace Park to walk me through every line item. She did, without condescension and without rushing. At the end of our meeting, she said, "Your grandmother talked about you every single time we met. Every year, for 20 years, she asked me if the portfolio was strong enough. I would tell her it was getting there. She would say, 'Good, keep going.' She never wavered once." I drove home from that meeting on a Wednesday afternoon in late August with Eleanor in the car seat behind me and the windows down, and I thought about Dorothy May Calloway at the age of 47 deciding that her granddaughter's freedom was worth 31 years of patience and discipline and a 12-year-old Buick. The process server arrived at our house on a Tuesday morning at 9:17. Marcus had just come downstairs in his workout clothes. I was in the kitchen with Eleanor. I heard the doorbell. I heard Marcus open it. I heard a voice I did not recognize say his name and ask him to confirm his identity. I heard the silence that followed. Marcus came into the kitchen holding a large envelope. His face was the color of old chalk. He looked at me and then at the envelope and then at me again. He said, "What is this?" I said. "That is the legal separation petition. My attorney filed it last Thursday." He set the envelope on the counter. He said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Claire, we just had a baby." I said, "We did." I was there for all of it. He looked at me for a long moment, and I held his gaze without effort because I had been preparing for this moment for 8 weeks, and I was very calm in the way that my grandmother was very calm, which is to say completely. He sat down at the kitchen island. He set his palms flat on the counter. He said, "How long have you been planning this?" I said, "I made the decision the morning after you left the delivery room." He said, "That is not fair. You know that was complicated." I said, "It was 11:47 in the morning, Marcus. Our daughter was born at 4:51. You were gone for 6 hours and 19 minutes. He opened his mouth and nothing came for a few seconds. Then he said, "Where are you going to go? How are you going to do this?" And this was the moment. This was the moment I had been moving toward since a Saturday in July when I sat in Robert Hargrove's office and looked at a number I had not known existed. I said, "That's not something you need to worry about." He said, "Claire, I need you to tell me what's going on. Are you working with someone?" "Did your mother?" I said, "My grandmother left me a trust." He waited. I let the sentence sit. He said, "Okay." "And," I said, "the trust is valued at $45,200,000. It's in my name. It was established before our marriage. It doesn't constitute marital property under Tennessee law. My attorney has already confirmed this through the court filing." The color that had been chalk in his face became something else entirely. There is a particular expression that appears on a person's face when they realize the ground they were standing on was never theirs. It is not anger, and it is not grief, and it is not shock exactly. It is a kind of recalibration happening in real time, like watching a machine try to run a program it was not built for. He said very quietly, "45 million." I said, "Yes." He said, "Your grandmother." I said, "Yes." He said, "She never seemed like." I said, "I know." The silence in that kitchen was the most complete silence I have ever been inside of. Eleanor made a small sound from her seat, and I looked at her and she was looking at the window, which is what she did in those early weeks, tracking light with a focus that seemed unreasonably advanced for someone who had been alive for 15 days. Marcus sat at the island for a long time. Then he said, "I want to talk about this. I want to figure out if there is a way." I said, "Angela Marsh is my attorney. Her number is in the documents. She'll handle all communications going forward." He looked at me like he was trying to find the version of me he had married, the one who apologized when he left for golf the morning of her grandmother's funeral, the one who made dinner the night he came home late from a trip and did not explain where he had been, the one who had driven to Franklin alone every third weekend for 7 years and never once complained about it. That version of me had been standing in my grandmother's kitchen on a Saturday in July, watching a number on a piece of paper and understanding, with the kind of clarity that does not require shouting, that she was done. He moved out on a Saturday in September. He took the watches, his clothes, the espresso machine he had bought himself for Christmas, and 2 of the 6 plants we had grown from seeds on the kitchen windowsill. He did not take the 4th one from the left, which was the one I had started from a cutting Grandma Dorothy gave me 2 Thanksgivings ago. He left it on the sill. I do not know if he did not notice it or if he left it on purpose. Either way, it was still there when I watered it the next morning. His attorney contacted Angela the following week. The conversation was brief. The trust assets were not marital property. The marital estate was divided according to the Tennessee statutes. Marcus received his half of the joint accounts, his retirement fund, and his equity share in the house, which we agreed to sell. It was a clean division of a modest marital estate, and it was accomplished without drama, because there was no leverage for drama. He had spent 6 years assuming he knew exactly what our life contained. He had not asked the right questions. My mother called me the week after the separation was filed. She had heard from my Uncle Dennis, who had heard from someone in Franklin that I had inherited something from Dorothy. Her exact words were, "Why didn't you tell me, Paige? You should have told the family." I said, "Mom, her name was Claire." There was a pause, and my mother said, "What?" I said, "My name is Claire, Mom. I have been Claire my whole life." She said, "I know that. I was thinking of your cousin." I let the silence sit for exactly as long as it needed to, and then I said, "I'll call you later this week." I did call her later that week, and the week after. I am not estranged from my mother, but I am clear, in a way I had not been before, about what I will carry and what I will set down. Grandma Dorothy had also left letters. Robert Hargrove gave them to me at our second meeting, 3 sealed envelopes in her handwriting. One addressed to my mother, one to my Uncle Dennis, one to me. Mine said, "Claire, the money is the easy part. The hard part is deciding every day to be exactly who you are, even when the room would prefer a quieter version of you. You've been doing it your whole life. Keep going. All my love, G." I have it framed on the wall of the office I set up in the house I bought in October. A 3-bedroom craftsman in East Nashville, light-filled and slightly crooked in the way of old houses that have settled into themselves. Eleanor's room is yellow. The office has Grandma Dorothy's gin rummy cards on the bookshelf and her tackle box from the garage, and the plant from the kitchen windowsill, which is, against reasonable expectation, thriving. Grace Park and I meet every 6 weeks. We are having conversations about the Williamson County land parcel and about a philanthropic structure for a portion of the trust. I want to establish an education fund for teachers in Tennessee. Grandma Dorothy was a school teacher for 32 years, and I think the most accurate form of gratitude I can offer is to make sure other people's children are taught by people who can afford to stay in the profession they chose. Angela Marsh finalized the divorce in December. The decree was clean and documented, and it was over. Marcus sent a single text message 3 weeks after it was finalized. It said, "I hope Eleanor is well. Tell her I'll be in touch about a schedule." Angela handled the response. "I do not hate Marcus Weston. That feels important to say because this story might seem like it is about him, and it is not. It is about a woman who drove a 12-year-old Buick and turned off lights when she left a room and played gin rummy with her granddaughter on Fridays for 20 years and quietly, patiently, without needing anyone to know about it, built something that would outlast her. It is about the decision I made at 11:47 in the morning on a Tuesday in August while my husband was walking out a door and my daughter's heartbeat was filling the room. The decision was not made in anger. It was made in the particular kind of stillness that arrives when you finally stop waiting for someone to see what you're worth, and you decide to see it yourself. That was the moment I stopped being the woman who apologized for taking up space and started becoming the woman my grandmother always knew I was. I am sitting in my office right now on a Thursday morning in April. Eleanor is 7 months old. She sits up now, briefly and with great personal satisfaction, and she has her great-grandmother's eyes. I made the coffee myself this morning, and I drank it in my own kitchen, at my own table in my own house, and I thought about Dorothy May Calloway doing the same thing in Franklin for 20 years and feeling. I imagine exactly this. You do not need to be loud to be powerful. You do not need to announce what you have. You just need to know it completely. The way you know your own name, the way you know the weight of what someone built for you across 31 years, and you need to hold it steadily while everything else rearranges itself around you. If there is someone in your life who has decided you are low maintenance, that you will absorb what is given and ask for nothing in return, that your silence is consent to being overlooked, I want you to know something. Stillness is not the same as absence. Patience is not the same as surrender. And sometimes the most powerful thing you will ever do is simply refuse to sign the document they put in front of you, set down your cards on the table, and let the room go very, very quiet. Eleanor is looking at the window again right now, tracking the light. I think she learned it from her great-grandmother. Before I go, I want to ask you something directly. If the person who believed in you most, who quietly arranged the world so that you would be safe, left you a letter right now, what do you think it would say? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know, and subscribe if this story meant something to you. I'll see you in the next one. I want to take a moment to thank every single one of you who watches, comments, and keeps showing up for these stories. You are the reason we tell them. There is something profound about knowing that a woman sitting alone in her car, or on her porch, or in a hospital waiting room might hear one of these stories and feel less invisible. That is not a small thing. That is the entire reason we are here. Every like, every comment, every subscriber tells us that these women's stories deserve to be heard, and we will keep telling them. We are so grateful for you. See you tomorrow.